Hi, this is Lori from To the Trade, and I have Niall with me. Hi, Niall.
Hi.
And we have Ben with us. Ben, kind of tell us all about you. Tell us about you and your business, what you do.
All right. All right. Yeah. My name is Ben Warwas, and my firm is called Byben, one word, Byben. And we mostly do sort of hillside residential architecture and interior design in Los Angeles, mostly on the east side of Los Angeles. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. How have you been feeling about the fires? I just want to kind of get in there with that. I know that we all have a lot of feelings about that, but how are you handling it being right there?
yeah, there was a moment where we didn't actually have to evacuate, but my partner wanted to move when the Hollywood fire began and steal us. And so we did. We went to my brother's house, but then we were able to come back. The power came back on. But I do have some fairly, close friends who lost homes, and I've actually already talked to them potentially about rebuilding. And yeah, so I think, yeah, one of them is sure they want to rebuild, and the other one is trying to decide. The one actually had kind of like their own neighborhood. They had about eight, yeah, rental houses. They're kind of like ADUs, but they
Oh,
were Oh,
wow.
wow. So, but yeah, it's so,
True.
I mean, I just sort of sitting around my house and trying to imagine what it would be like to lose every single thing, you
I know
know?
you look around and you're like, "Oh, that's something I got in the 4th grade, and that's a gift from a friend that passed away." And, it's just I can't imagine everything being gone, to have limited access to insurance so that it would replace the things that you could replace, and then just, like, the worry about, you know, living there in general. Is it going to be safe? Is
Yeah.
it like, the chemicals and the air quality and the water quality, and
You
is it
know,
gonna
yeah,
happen again? Am I gonna rebuild it and this happens all over again? I mean, it's just a scary proposition, and I feel for every single person going through that right now. I kind of got, a little taste of it. My husband's mother, her house burned down and they lost everything, when we were, together, and it just it's awful when that happens. I mean, it's traumatizing. It's really traumatizing. It's not just stuff. It's a weird, unique thing to go through something like that. I can't
Mhm.
even imagine. I think even just the survivor guilt alone too, of being kind of in the vicinity and being able to drive through it, and it impacts everyone. It impacts everyone that is near it or affected by it, and your friends, your family. Those kinds of situations are just scary to be a part of. So
yeah,
I'm feeling for all of you. I really am. I know 4 designers personally that lost all their homes, all of their things, everything that they own. I've been working behind the scenes with a few different people that are organizing efforts and trying to allocate funds. Like, there are a couple of businesses that were directed to us that we've been directing to the right resources that we're willing to give. One was giving $500,000 worth of furniture, and one was giving $750,000 cash. So we were kind of helping those go through to at least get to the resources we'd like them to get to, which is, the people in our community. I wish I could help every single person, but I would love to help the people in my community for sure.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
had a close friend who her house survived, and almost all the houses around it burned down.
Oh,
And
Wow.
she was renting it to someone, and incidentally, the woman she was renting it to, her I think it was her mother, had another house in another neighborhood up altitude that also survived, and they both had CMU walls as fences for three sides, and so 6 feet tall. And so, yeah, she's really struggling with what should she do, and
sure.
neighbors moved right back in and just cleaned it up themselves. The neighbor across the street, and I mean, it's just so insane. Both people who like lost homes and kept homes, should they go back? How extensively do they clean it? And some of these older people, they just don't know what else to do. They're like, I just want to go home. That's
Sure.
it's their our existence is our home.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was watching the videos as it happened, and it was just horrifying to see elderly people trying to evacuate, family members carrying them. Like, it's just
Yeah,
and then you do have, of course, they wanna be back in their home. Of course, they wanna be in the one safe place that they know, but it's not sure how safe it is. It's
yeah,
scary. The unknown factor is pretty scary. I was just in LA a few months ago and driving. I had lunch in Beverly Hills with a group of designers, and then I went to a design event with a brand, and it's just we were talking about. I took a couple of years ago at Pacific Coast Highway Drive, and my friend in Malibu sent me like, look, this is where you were. We found to, oh my God, it's so horrible. It's so horrible. I can't even imagine what it must feel like. I saw this reporter who did during COVID a drive, and he just kind of like put a camera up on his dashboard and drove Pacific Coast Highway, when there was no traffic during COVID. And then he took the same drive after this just to compare like what's gone and what isn't. And it's crazy to me. Like the different views that were non existent because the buildings were there, and, just how you feel about that. There's some feelings of, obviously the terror and trauma and all of that. But then there's also a weird returning of nature that you're like, okay, there could be possibilities. And I hope that we can remain hopeful. And I hope that the area does get rebuilt. And I hope that we face less of these issues as we go forward. I think one of the things that I thought was very interesting was, did you happen to see the house that was passive home design? I'm sure you were.
I
Yeah,
co I have a few friends that work there. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's sort of what we're all talking about is sort of
sure.
the spray foam roof cavity, which is the ceiling, and it's actually fairly minimal cost. I mean, ideally removing the eaves and then sort of stucco or this concrete board on the outside of the building, and really, it's just the attic cavity, I think that really was the culprit in so many of these homes because they were also
Sure. Just getting the little embers coming through and then,
it's
you
just
know, gone. I mean, are you going to be employing as an architect, like going through your process? Are you changing things going forward to move towards passive home design? Is that a
I mean, I was kind of doing that anyway. I mean, a
sure,
lot of are trying to shoot for like heavily insulated homes that, it doesn't, the weather here is not that intense, but it just always helps. And the new code, even before any of this, has, 2x6 walls, much thicker insulation. And I already have clients that already want to do spray foam and really sort of max out the insulation. And there are these products that sort of like suck air in from the outside and just slowly sort of cool and warm it, these sort of heat pump concepts.
yeah,
That stuff is coming about, and I'm actually working on a house of my own, and it is already 1 hour fireproof, and it's hillside, so it has to be, have sprinklers and the whole sprinkler thing now, for the insurance people, a lot of developers now just put sprinklers anyway because it makes it easier to sell the house because of the
sure.
insurance. So,
Yeah. I
and
would I would I would guess that that would be really, really an important feature. And I was also thinking, are you thinking about retrofitting, or are people talking about retrofitting the spaces that survived with better air quality filtration and water filtration? Are they concerned about that right now?
I haven't heard much of that because there's more of a lot of a talk of like just sort of the urban planning. If there is a possibility to get denser, I mean, the big conversation that's happening in all these meetings is how can we make these areas a little bit denser with ADUs? But it is interesting because I was thinking you could potentially sort of drywall your attic space as sort of a preventative measure for future fires. But there hasn't been much talk about that. They're really kind of trying to recover the trauma and listen to the community and then also, decide how they're going to go
Yeah.
building. And
Well, it's so tricky because so many people did not have proper fire insurance. And if they're still, I mean, I'm sure there's so much of the finance side of it to be dug out. Do you still have a mortgage?
they're,
And one would think you still have a mortgage payment, even if it's that way. What do you do about that? You have a mortgage payment with no house left, now you have a rental unit if you're so lucky to get into one of the rental spaces that were available further away, that kind of situation, which is really devastating for a lot of people. And I think that you're going to need a certain amount of time to recover and just think about the financial impact that they are personally going through. And then, of course, every day, probably like a new morning for some lost item that's special. There's going to be a moment of, oh gosh, we lost that. I forgot about that. Or we don't know an inventory of everything we own instantly. It kind of hits us over time, I would think.
Well, yeah, the one potential client, his kid was like, they were going to go to Disneyland. He's like, "Can I get a light?" And he was saying, "Well, we already buy you one of them." Then the kids, oh, it burned.
Oh,
Rings that like, it's gone. But I will tell
yeah.
you, have to pay their mortgage. I have spoken to two people, and actually, when they get the money from the insurance, it has the bank's name on it also. So you
I,
have to get the check. You have to somehow convince the bank to let you have the check. And so it's, yeah, because if you haven't paid the house off, you don't own the house. And so, yeah, and they'll give you like a break for 3 months from the mortgage, but it doesn't mean that the mortgage stops.
right.
You have to make this balloon payment in December or whatever, so it's, the mortgages do not go.
And that's just such a scare. I mean, I know anyone listening, I'm sure all of our designers listening, just what a nightmare situation. And obviously impacted a lot more people than just our design community. But we had several people that were both manufacturing reps or
Oh,
brand people that worked there or magazine. We have a lot of designers and design industry people that were impacted directly. And it's horrible to think about what they're going through right now. I just can't. Thank you for at least talking to us about that because it's been absolutely on my mind. And I had to immediately, and actually a friend of mine who lived in Pasadena as well, a designer friend, we were all in Paris, had a trip booked well before the fires, had to go, had commitments. And last thing you want to do is go to a party in Paris when so many people have been impacted by such a tragedy. But we all have our work commitments we have to do. And it hasn't really left my mind despite that. I've just been working behind the scenes and trying to help in every way that I can. And I just think about it all the time. It's just so devastating. So devastating. So
it's crazy. I mean, I was speaking to a client who wasn't impacted, and he was in Highland Park. He said every single person that he knows in Altadena lost their home.
yeah.
And 75% of one of the potential clients of the school lost their home. So basically, his whole entire school. But he said that school found a new campus and it started back up again, and he went to,
Oh,
and
wow.
it almost brought tears to his eyes.
Oh,
And
of course. Of course.
progress is being made, especially for the kids.
Yeah. 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 I remember years ago, I worked on a project. I worked in the printing industry for a long time before I got into this industry.
Oh,
And I was involved in helping, construct a mural. When the Newtown school shooting happened, and
oh,
they actually didn't return back to that school. They went to a different school when they came back, and they built a new school. And they had, of course, wanted that school to feel it was very intentionally made to be safe and comforting and special. Like a lot of people volunteered, a lot of volunteers to try to make sure that, there was, really beautiful murals and, a lot of art, a lot of, welcoming to those students who lost so many fellow students. And it, when are facing a tragedy like this where lives were lost, big loss of a sense of safety, that, you know, it's really important to remember that art and is such a big part of making people feel safe again. And I think it's remarkable that you're already talking about urban planning and how to bring that sense of safety back to these people because I'm sure it's comforting to know that there are people who were not affected that are spending a lot of time thinking about it and trying to make it better for them, make a safe space for them again. So I think it's great. I think it's great that you're doing that. I think it's very remarkable.
I'm not that involved, but I'm going
I
to.
don't know, but just the fact that you are paying attention and trying, I think it's really, really wonderful because it takes even in small ways. I mean, I wasn't hugely responsible. I helped a mural get done at the school. I wasn't hugely involved in being boots on the ground helping either, but everybody sort of like caring, participating, in any way that they can is
Your,
so yeah.
your village.
Yes, it does. And speaking of that designer who came with us to Paris, she is sort of how you and I were connecting before. You were in fashion design before you were in
I was.
architecture. I want to hear the story. Tell me a little bit about what you did first.
Well, yeah, the story kind of actually all revolves around skateboarding. And I was a skateboarder and I started building skateboard ramps that everyone was building, the half pipes. And then it became the mini ramp and we cut the half pipe down. And then it was the beginning of street skateboarding. Powell Peralta was in sort of this intellectual battle with World Industries. And it was the moment when the skateboard pants started to cost more money.
Yeah.
When, like, typically you would just buy pants, and now the skateboard companies were selling pants. And so we saw we didn't want to pay $50 for a pair of pants. And a friend of mine and I were like, we could just figure this out. And so we just started making pants. It was also at the time of like a rave scene. And so we were already sort of opening up the inseam of our pants and making them really huge. But it's funny because my students now, dress in Jinko. They literally dress the way that,
I was just gonna say, Jenga. So I dated I dated a skater boy back in the day in high school. And I actually was really good friends with the guy that owned our local skate shop. And he had the skate, he had a whole half pipe and in the skate shop as well as like clothes. And for a little while, I had a t-shirt brand in the skate world because
I remember.
he wanted me to do that back when heat transfers were kind of new. And that's kind of how I got into printing actually, was starting out with these, heat transfer, like vinyl sticker kind of things. And our brand was Spy Girl. And we were like spy versus spy, but feminine.
Oh,
It was
wow.
like for skater girls.
I feel like I might have even seen that.
You might have.
Or-
We had pretty good distribution. Like
oh,
he helped us get some decent distribution. It was, you know, it was like my college job really was this like skater brand that I did.
that's that. I mean, I eventually tried to have a snowboard brand company, clothing company, and then I sort of tried to do sort of skateboarding clothing. And it wasn't until, excuse me, I moved to New York and I met this woman who bought for stores in Japan. And then I was able just very minimally to sell to a few stores in Japan. And they're like, they kind of pay 50% up front. So they pay for the production. And it's just like a total, the best client you can have. But then they tend to not buy the next season because they're just getting everything is just brand new, brand new. But then from there, I started interacting with bands. I was kind of involved in the punk scene and, Berkeley and Oakland and Gilman. And so I knew some of the people there. And I first started working for this band called The Locust. And they're kind of like a math core band from San Diego. And they wore like sort of masks. And I made this that looked like bugs because it was sort of, mocked up by the bugs. And then from there, I made the clothes for La Tigra, which was kind of the biggest band. And then there was a few other random sort of underground 400 blows, these random, just kind of local friends who were in band. And so that was sort of the more successful clothing stuff that I did. And a Locust, I did 7 outfits for. I kind of worked for them for 12 years. But yeah, and so that's kind of the whole fashion thing. But I was always sort of like a construction manager and also like building things, 9 to 5. And then
Sure.
like as a fashion designer and even
And creatives, I mean, we like to get our fingers in everything. So I totally get it. I mean, it's very natural progression from where you live and what you were into and how you got in. I can picture you absolutely building, skate ramps and then going into, well, I'll do this, I'll do that. I think it's a great story. I think and when I met you, I was like, oh, we have to have that on video. I think that's such a fascinating path into
Yep.
architecture.
A fun moment. The neighbors didn't want the ramp at my parents' house, so I was able to move it to a friend's house And then, of course, I convinced him to make it bigger. And then he immediately quit skateboarding. But his mom, she was so nice. She was even a lawyer. She was like, "Oh, you guys can still skate in it." And then we slowly realized that there were literally opera singers living next door, and they were not.
Oh my gosh.
And they would, and we had, a bit of attitude, these like teenagers. But yeah, that was like such a funny thing. And there was a parrot that used to show up, this like Amazon parrot that would always show up when we were skating. It was almost like it liked the sound.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It was just such,
Well, it does have like a set, like slapping sound, like crashing sound. Um, I can imagine people being well, obviously, like we even experienced it here in New England where there are terrible roads to skate. I don't know how any of the kids
yeah.
really skate here because
Right. Yeah.
we get frost heaves and then the immediately the pavement cracks immediately every year. You can get fresh paved. We have our road was just paved, but now it's winter, so we already have cracks all over it because of the frost heaves. So it's not a great skating experience, but the kids here were as into it and snowboarding, the whole thing. That was the year when I was in high school was sort of when people were transitioning to snowboarding. It was skiing, skiing, skiing. I grew up skiing and then snowboarding was starting to be a thing.
Yeah. I did. It was right. There was one resort that allowed it. And they would have somebody go up with you and give you like a test or something. And yeah, I was like right at the beginning of some,
Yeah.
but yeah, I actually
My
went to,
brother got really good at it. I wasn't really that great at it. I tried it. I mean, I grew up skiing since I was 2, so I was
oh,
just
yeah.
thought it was too different at first, you know? But my kids, they don't know how to ski. They only know how to snowboard.
Yeah, I did and it originally learn how to ski, but as soon as the snowboard, I was like, I was never
You're
going.
on it. Yeah. Well, you were Californian, so you were like into the surfing already. It was just for me, it was just such I'm a New Englander, so
Yeah.
not going away from skiing. I love it. But that it's such a neat path, and I love this industry because every time Niall, isn't this true? Every single time we talk to a different professional, we all came from different angles into this industry,
Yeah.
and, it's just
All these gems,
I know.
layers, Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you always wonder, like, how did you get in here? And how did this happen? And it's just
Yeah.
it's a matter of the more I talk to designers around the world and the more I talk to different professionals in this industry, it's so much just wanting to do it and claiming the space, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so
Well,
much
they
of
say
it is that.
design is the number one second career in the world.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's the number one thing that people transition to in the world as a
I
career.
guarantee you it's
Yeah.
because all of us when we were little were drawing pictures,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
On paper
Yeah.
and designing things,
Yeah.
houses and outfits and things like that. And then we lost that along the way. We were
Yep.
told to be accountants
Be a
or
lawyer, be a doctor. Yep.
be a
Yep. Yep.
doctor, And then, you get older and you're like, I want to do what I actually wanted to do when I was little. And most of
Exactly.
us is design in some way or creative pursuits.
Yeah. Well,
And
design is so broad too that,
oh yeah.
you could dip into it in varying ways, which is
Yes.
nice. Yeah.
Yeah. Graphic,
So true.
art direction, art, photography, film,
Yeah. Right.
so much of creativity really just jumping in fashion. Yeah, the world is your oyster if you want to get into design for sure. But I found that the biggest marker of success is just I would say ingenuity is really the big thing. If it's somebody who is like diving in, wanting to learn everything, obsessed with new things, wanting to try and not being afraid of making a fool of yourself in the process.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of all goes back to the first ramp because I was just like, I want to do this. And I had no idea what I was doing. And one of my dad's friends, I was like, oh, Billy will just help us. He knows how to build. And it was just like, and there was some stuff in Thrasher, and it was just the ability to just jump in and just like, let's just do this with
Yeah.
no clue. I mean,
Yeah.
a carpentry class where I had made like a little toy boat or something like that. But it was very much, let's just do this. And when you're younger, you just do that. It's like you
Yeah.
go, oh yeah, on road trips, you just do this. You kind of see it as totally normal. And then when you get older, you start to be like, oh, whoa, I don't know. Like, is this
I
okay?
know. I was out to dinner with my girlfriends the other day. And one of my friends, we used to live together when we were younger, and every time we get on this conversation, it's always because we have daughters that are the age we were when we lived together, and we're just like, it was so crazy with some of the things we did. Oh, I met this guy. I'm going to go out on his boat. And we just go out on his boat. Or I met these people and I went back to the hotel room of a baseball team with her one time. Like we didn't do anything. We're just like partying with this professional baseball team in Florida. We were nuts. I'm like, we were so lucky not to be murdered. I don't know how else to say it. We were just constantly put in danger of being murdered.
Or maybe not. Yeah.
Maybe not. Maybe we just
Or,
had no clue that we were like we
yeah.
would never tell it. We would be so outraged if our daughters did, but we did. Absolutely. I can't even imagine Isabel just getting on a boat with some stranger she doesn't even know. Can you, Niall? I mean,
Yeah. Maybe there. Yeah. I hop freight trains and
oh my God, that's a story. Like, oh well.
Oh
for
my
like
God.
days. Yeah. It was, I mean, that's all the kind of punk rock kids were writing all these zines and they would go all over the entire country in the snow. They would ride in the units and the engines. And I was just like, because I was like living at home with my parents and these kids had moved to Berkeley. They were from a broken home. They were just much more adventurous. And so we did eventually do it. But yeah, I mean, I look back on it, it's something I'd wanted to do, but I would not want my daughter to do that.
No, no, it's a crazy it was a different time. You had no cell phones. You had
Yeah.
no one watching, no one
Oh yeah.
really caring. My parents didn't well, I watched my kids' location at like little young adults than more than my parents had any clue where I was. So very different time. I want to hear about some of your projects. What are you most excited about right now for projects?
Well, that is a good question. Actually, I'm working on an addition. I did an addition recently. It's a lot of these hillside projects, and the clients had sort of a one-story house, but it went downhill and they had a pool in the back. And so they wanted a covered patio. And so what we did is we put the master, or sorry, the primary bedroom is the addition, and then it was sort of on legs. I called it the three-legged bedroom. And so then we did this whole covered patio. And that's what they had wanted because they have sort of a lot of trees. They have a really nice site, but they kind of like wanted the space that didn't have any, leaves and stuff like that. And they have sort of like a little kitchen down there. And so
Nice.
I did that. And I have a new client who kind of has a different style house. It's more of just like a flat lot. But what we're doing is we're doing a very similar addition, and on their project, they want to be able to look out of the front. So their bedroom's in the back. So what we're doing is we're doing kind of like two stories in the back with this sort of window that looks out the front. Cause in the front of their lot, they look up at Mount Washington. So they have this nice sort of mount kind of, I mean, it's not mountains because it has houses on it, but it's really pretty. And so we kind of made this addition that you go up into the new primary bedroom, and then that you look over your entire house and you can see all this hill. And then they get the same thing. They get this sort of covered patio, and they can go access the backyard through their kitchen. And it's interacting with this ADU that they built, and so there's lots of curves. And I kind of always see it. It kind of looks like somebody's sort of looking over their shoulder. That's kind of how I sort of drew it, sort of designed it. That was the kind of idea, but it's got a huge, huge window. And that project, yeah, I am very excited about. That's a fun.
I bet. Have you ever gotten into interiors at all, doing architecture?
I do I don't do like the furniture, but I do all the tile and all the cabinets. And sometimes I do the shades or the curtains and stuff like that. I've been trying to do that more at my new home from sewing. I've started sewing like these sort of scalloped curtains, and I did this whole like little breakfast nook curtain where I kind of created like an arched curtain instead of building the arch to sort of like make the breakfast nook kind of cozy. And so I'm kind of bridging, trying to think of these interesting ways to use fabric as, in interior ways.
Oh,
But yeah,
absolutely.
I definitely get deep into all the tiles, and I tend to kind of combine sort of inexpensive tiles with like sort of a moment of a more, expensive tile to sort of keep the budget, on track and
How about
stuff.
furnishings? Are you doing any furnishings at all?
No, I don't. I did a house where we designed all the furniture completely. One of the
Oh,
first, it was sort of a collaboration, and it was very much based on Donald Judd's furniture, but it wasn't a copy. It was just sort of based on his stuff. And yeah, we made everything. We made all the beds, the couch, the dining room table, all the chairs, like every single piece of furniture we
oh,
designed.
wow.
And so,
I love that. I love that. I'm only asking because I had a meeting earlier today with an architect who has rather large firm. They have 25 staff of 25. And he, shared with me that his most profitable side of his business is interior design, which I was kind of surprised about, actually. I was blown away. I did not know that architects were jumping into that. So, I mean, usually we see sometimes design build firms,
yeah.
builders and architect. Sometimes it's like a designer wife and a builder husband, or sometimes it's a designer who's also a contractor. I've got a lot of that. I have some architects who kind of transitioned into design more, like interior architecture, but I hadn't heard that yet. So I was like, oh, I had no idea that that was kind of coming about with some architecture firms.
Yeah, I think when they realize how much more money interior designers are making, they're like, I need to get into that. And Michael Graves did a lot of that. He did all the Disney stuff.
Sure,
He also said that he made all the money with the furniture because I think he designed the furniture, and that was part of the contract. And
sure.
that's where he kind of really started to somehow make the
But
money.
it's so funny that you say that because I always think of designers as the least paid.
Mhm.
I think they
Yeah.
all,
We ever think of I saw Niall's face.
I'm like, where's the money here? What
He's
money?
still waiting.
where are my residuals?
Exactly.
Yeah, but
Exactly.
it's an interesting concept, I think, and I love when people are multidisciplinary where they can do a bunch of different things. I also had a podcast with Elizabeth Scruggs that just came out recently, and she is a designer who's a contractor herself.
Yeah.
So it's always very interesting to me when people are able to juggle both paths and able to do both of those. It's all that certainly creative thinking, but also the very analytical thinking. And often it's difficult to find people who have both of that, both working, well. But I think designers are uniquely fitted for that kind of thing because they tend to be very analytical, but also very creative.
Yeah, it's all
So,
about organization. I mean, I
yeah.
did project management for a while in New York of like,
Yeah.
Oh,
I enjoyed it. I mean, I enjoyed sort of like you're kind of just always putting out fires and sort of like,
Sure.
yeah, because that's when I realized I could be a designer, an architect. Is I would get these sort of drawings in a fax machine. We would get the faxes of like they would be trying to solve these detail problems, and I was like, oh, that doesn't work. Send another one. Like, let's just do that, And it was like one of the. I was like, I can do that. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't think I want to do both, but if I had a partner, I would. I've been trying to talk my brother into doing it. He is a cabinet maker and a furniture maker, and I think he would be great at the construction side. But yeah, it's a different skill set, and I don't know.
It's good to have partners, and people I know in the design world, there are so many designers probably listening too that know that building that really great relationship with an architect or with a contractor or someone that is complementary to your skill set has been invaluable to their business. Sometimes it's another designer. I know designers who are partners with other designers, some loosely where they're not really physically in business together, but they have a strategic plan, share everything, operate essentially like they are business partners, and then sometimes more formal, where they really are in business together. And it it's essential to have people that are working with you that have sort of the answer to the different parts of it that you're not interested in doing.
And then also, when things go south with the client or so on, and sometimes it helps to have someone else that, Jenny's going to take over now,
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Good cop,
Yeah.
bad cop them all day long.
Ah, even if that's not what they typically do, you're like, I think we need to transition to you, being the point person. And I mean, construction is just such a nightmare regardless that
Sure.
there's always drama, and just how do we navigate through the drama and finish the project and make it amazing and finish it fast. And so, yeah, I definitely don't take any of that stuff personally, but I've worked with a partner on the first project that I did that we got a ton of press. We kind of did the schematic design together, and then I did all the sort of permitting and all that other stuff. And then he came back when we did finishes, and it's good. It's good. I mean, I do have a lot of friends who have broken up with their design partners.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
No, but yeah, I enjoy collaborating, and I would, in a perfect world, I probably would have a partner because
Sometimes it's like you have to recognize you have to be the kind of personality that enjoys that give and take, and sometimes you're not. I mean, sometimes that you're not that kind of person. And so it's harder to set up that kind of system, but it's also equally hard to be the CEO of a company and scale and grow and have employees. I mean, we get designers who all the time are writing into a interior design community because of conflicts like that. So, like, their best employee, they trained them and they taught them everything they know, and now they're going into business competing with them, or
right.
things like that. It's heartbreaking on both sides because, I mean, people want to grow and they want to change and they're allowed to do that. But at the same time, you can't not understand what that feels like to have taught someone, invested in their career, and they're leaving you and taking some of your business.
That's how everyone starts. I mean, that's like how Frank Lloyd Wright started. It's just
Sure.
very difficult to navigate that all. And even just getting a halfway decent employee is just, it's difficult.
Not alone. Not alone. So it's you're heartbroken in both ways. You just lost a great employee, and
Yeah.
now you're their competition. There's
No,
Yeah.
I have a past employee that I would love to work with again. He was
Oh, that's good. That's good.
him, and yeah, he was
It's
an
always great when you have a good one. I mean, and there are so many great, we get design students too that pay attention to the community. Uh, I always try to mentor them as much as I can and make introductions because, it's hard to get those people who are so passionate. And when you see somebody who, I always think it's like an indicator that they're going to be successful. And I don't know why I think this because it's really literally just patting myself on the back. But I'm like, if you're a student and you find interior design community and you're asking questions, it to me is an indicator that you're kind of a go-getter, because usually people don't think about community or finding resources until they're in it, until they actually have the job and they
Right.
need the help. They don't think about it as an anticipation of what is to come. And so I always think of it as a very strong sign that someone is really in good shape if they're reaching out to resources, mine, interior design community or someone else's, because it shows they really want to be in this industry badly. And it wasn't just, I just want to do design and pick pretty things, and they have no concept and they're just like talking to their friends and being in school and not caring about what the outcome will be. There are some that come to me freshman year and they're like, this is my dream. This is what I want to do. How do I meet people? What do I do? I want to be a designer. And I'm always like, you're going to do it. You can just tell.
Yeah, no, that's a skill that, yeah, I wish I had had.
Yeah. Why don't we had this ability to be connected like this then? You had to really phone call people and show up and write to people. There was no way to just do it online now. This is like the lazy way to do it.
Yeah, interact with some students like that. And I was at SciArc. I went to SciArc for architecture school, And I was chatting with another student who recently graduated, and she's, part of the of the, the past student club and stuff like that. And you could just tell that she was a go-getter and she had interacted with her employer long before she was employed there. And I was telling her, I was like, you should teach a class
You
because they don't know this. They just have their heads down and they're doing renderings all night. And they should be forced to sort of, spend an hour a week networking. And
I agree with you. That's exactly what I tell the students when they do reach out. I'm like, right now, where do you want to work? Some of them you have to tell them, look, where you want to be, where you live, you have to get out of there because
yeah,
there's no design there. You have to move to an area that there is design. But sometimes it's okay, you need to start networking. Who are the designers in your area you like? Start following them on Instagram, LinkedIn, start paying attention, interacting with them, like their posts, comment on their posts, get excited about what they're doing because when you're looking to, hire someone, they're going to think of you because you've been so active in their
Mhm.
TNs.
here we go, that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always surprising to me that students often think the first thing they should do is get a job at Restoration Hardware or
Oh, yeah.
that would be a great design job. And I'm always like, no, that wouldn't be. You should not work there. You should work here.
No, it's very similar to the concept of how they're trying to teach people sort of financial skills now.
Yeah.
Because they just don't teach that, and they don't teach this sort of networking concept, and also it just makes the whole thing more fun because you don't view your job as, oh, I gotta go to my job. You're like, oh, I'm hanging out with these people, and oh, I actually happen to work with them. Now there's this event, and it's a culture. It's kind of, I always compare it to like the skateboarding and the punk rock scene. It's once you get into it, it's just like everybody knows each other, and oh, there's this event, and oh, here, we'll share our ride share. It's a scene.
It
and
is.
not
It
a
is.
like a whole fun scene in a career, and there's drama and there's sort of
There's lots of drama. Don't we, Niall and I know lots of drama that we never tell.
it can be a lot of fun.
It really is. And I think that there was this perception of gatekeeping a lot in design for a long
Oh, yeah.
time. And I do think it's changed quite a bit. I think that there are a lot more designers that are willing to share and out there helping one another than there are those who, won't do that, won't entertain that kind of, relationship with other designers. I mean, there are a lot of designers that don't follow interior design community, but I would say just like when you follow interior design community or a part of interior design community, that's sort of what we encourage a lot is we try to pretend we're like the sorority of designers. And so we're like the fun hang out with us house and, getting people to be friends and like
Yeah.
having little events and things like that. And really, but also advocacy and helping. And so
Yeah, I
you
think
noticed when it's a designer who is particularly like getting it and ones that do not.
but I think we all win when we're all involved, because just like the shared knowledge, it's just, someone can call me up and they're like, I'm trying to pull this permit. And I was like, oh, I know that code here, 25.3. And they just saved 3 hours, 3 days.
Exactly. Yeah.
And, someone else might be like, oh, I know a great guy who can do upholstery, last minute, or, or even maybe someone has some extra upholstery, it's just like, as soon as you get involved. And that was like how architecture school is. If you're sitting in the computer lab with all your friends, everyone is learning different parts of the computer program, and you learn so much faster.
Yeah.
We all win. But I mean, there's definitely some people are good at sort of navigating being cagey. They act very social, but then they don't always give all the info. But I mean, it is what it is. I mean, we all are nervous that like our friend is going to get the project, but most of my friends have been, they've just all been fine. We have our ups and downs, but if we get projects, and some people get big projects, small projects, but I don't know. Yeah, I think just interacting and helping
being a part of the system, being a part of the community, and you're right, we're all better for that. We all learn from one another. We can all help one another when there is that that little question that, you know, that we need to know. It's so, I think it's so great that there are so many designers that are willing to do that. We just had a designer in the group say, I have overworked, I have so much work, I'm turning away work.
Yeah.
And then they messaged me and said that they got 50 messages from different designers in the group that were like, okay, pass some of that over to me. You're because I could use that right now.
Definitely. I mean, I've had people recommend me to projects at the beginning and even recently, and then I've sent projects to other people. It's just you're like, oh, this is too small or I'm too busy. And you want to, I definitely would like to send that to other people.
I mean, that's part of being in a community. It's part of being, in the club, and that should be what we all strive to do, is be there for one another. It's not like you have to give all of your intellectual property away. It's more that, can you be helpful in saving someone a few hours, or, passing a job you don't want on to a friend, because what goes around comes around, and that's just the way it is.
And even like just, client, designer, you have to have a good fit, like
Yeah.
had somebody be like, oh, they were interacting with the client, they were saying all this particular stuff, and he's, oh, this is a project for Ben. He was just like, and even, I've interacted with some clients and I'm like, I think I'm a little bit too adventurous for your taste. You might want to try this person. And then also I really try to tell my clients, you should talk to a bunch of designers, and
They
just
should.
take some time to sort of like understand how this whole process is going to work and try to think about what the outcome that you want. And, and just by talking to, 3 different architects, 3 different interior designers, your whole vision could change and, your project could get bigger or smaller. It's just a better process to go through. And I think for all of us, because, you get these very new clients and sometimes they have very unrealistic expectations.
Yeah.
And that could have been changed if they had talked to a few designers and they had been like, well, no, actually, you can't do that for that much money. So, yeah, I think the whole process, I mean, of course, it elongates the process, but I think it's a better outcome in the end.
It is. And collaboration, really can lead to a better product. So bringing in good experts. We always talk to the designers who use kitchen designers also in that same way, because I don't know if you are, familiar with that, but there's a lot of designers who don't do kitchen and bath. They just do more of the soft furnishing and crumb molding and, that kind of thing. But they don't usually, some of them don't touch kitchen and bath at all, because they don't really want to do that technical, like 1/8 of an inch work.
Drawings and everything.
Yeah. So sometimes they'll bring in a kitchen and bath person for that, and they will work like that together. So it might be an interior designer who often just does the interior design, and the kitchen and bath person always does the kitchen and bath, and they just share projects all the time and work together like that all the time.
No, I think that's
And the
great.
same thing with pulling in a lighting designer who is really great at lighting design. That's another layer, but it can make an amazing project when you have a bunch of people who have specific knowledge that is needed. Yeah. Well, this has been so great. We're going to make sure that our listeners can find you on social and on your website and check you out. I love your story. I think it's so cool. Such a neat adventure. And I'd love to see how we can all work together.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.